If the election was held today, President Donald Trump is expected to win the popular vote, according to 538's polling aggregate by a margin of 2.3%. This is after Joe Biden's miserable performance on the debate stage in last week's presidential debate. Currently, Trump holds 42.1% of the vote, Joe Biden holds 39.8%, and independent candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. holds 9.7%. But how would that translate onto electoral college map according to polling? In today's video, we will find out. This is the map with the safe states vote in. Joe Biden at 167 electoral college votes and Donald Trump at 125 electoral college votes. All of these states voted for their respective candidates by double digits in 2020, and 538 gives all these states a 93% chance or more at going for their respective candidates. Furthermore, polling suggests that none of these races are remotely competitive. Now we're going to start off here with the state of Maine here. Maine is a fascinating state politically. Maine is a state that voted for Barack Obama by a safe margin back in 2012 and has since became so much more competitive. In fact, 538 gives Biden less than a 3 in 4 chance of actually winning the state, making it quite close, as the state is expected to be determined by just about 5 percentage points. Additionally, Maine is quite fascinating politically, being the only state that implements the electoral district split system and also a ranked choice voting system. Right now, the most recent three-way poll, Donald Trump is ahead of Joe Biden by a margin of 1% in the most recent poll. However, ranked choice voting might change that. Ranked choice voting is a system where you can vote for multiple candidates based on your ranking of each of these candidates. At the first round, your first place options will be tabulated. Whoever got the least amount of votes, assuming no one reached 50% or a majority, will be eliminated and their votes will be redistributed to the second preferences and so on until one candidate reaches a majority. Currently, Joe Biden is going to get 51% and Donald Trump is going to get 49% of the vote, according to a recent ranked choice voting accounting polling. Although I wanted to be filling in this map in the three-way election polling results, because Maine does have ranked choice voting, I'm going to go ahead and give the state to Joe Biden because the ranked choice voting results are all it matters. As for the second congressional district, you can give that safely towards President Donald Trump, as he leads by 20% in the one poll conducted in that district, though it is noticeable that even then, Trump is not at 50% in that one poll, which means there could still be a ranked choice voting scenario. The next state here is the state of New Hampshire. In New Hampshire back in 2020, Joe Biden won the state by 7 over Donald Trump, despite the fact Clinton only carried the state by 0.3% back in 2016. If you look at the model by 538 here, you can see that Joe Biden has about a 7 in 10 chance of winning the state, and Trump has about 3 in 10, and I believe that would be about right in my opinion. Now, the state historically, in terms of polling, has really not been too favorable for Donald Trump. However, after his pre-debate surge, after President Biden's lackluster performance in the debates, Trump has led in his first poll, and that is also the most recent poll conducted in the state, showing Trump with a 2% lead over Biden, sufficient for a tilt characterization for the former president. Next, we go to the state of New Jersey. Traditionally a heavily Democratic state, a state that voted for Biden by a safe margin back in 2020, is suddenly pretty competitive, as this 538 website only gives Biden a single-digit lead in the state. Furthermore, polling and some of the recent indications suggest the state might be closer than what people expect, with President Trump visiting in that state. The most recent poll, head-to-head, actually shows President Biden down in the state by 2%, though I mind you that is by United 2024, a Republican-funded intern. As to the three-way race, which what we are basing this map on, does say that this race is a toss-up, which means that goes into this yellow category as a toss-up state. Now we go to the state of Pennsylvania. Prior debate, Biden's numbers were rebounding and he took the lead briefly in the state. But after his disastrous performance on the debate stage, what you saw was that Biden's numbers slipped again, and the most recent morning consult poll showed Biden down 44 to 41 in the state. Not the best numbers for Biden, considering he won the state by 1.2% over President Trump in 2020. Biden has very little room to fall, and it looks like that he has lost quite a bit of support thanks to his handling of the Israel-Hamas war, the economy, the inflation, and the border crisis. And again, 1.2% is a very slim margin. Trump has probably lost a few voters, but it looks like Biden has lost significantly more, contributing to his 3% deficit in the state of Pennsylvania, a state that he essentially must win in 2024. Trump has already received two flips on this map, the important battleground state of Pennsylvania and the critical state for Joe Biden, the state of New Hampshire, with New Jersey in the toss-up column, despite Biden winning the state by 16 points in 2020. And the news is not expected to go better for Biden in the next coming states. In the state of Ohio here, Maris predicts a 7-point victory for the president, which is pretty much on track with its 2020 margin. The state was used to be a bellwether state, a state that predicted the right president for 60 years, until it broke the record in 2020 when the state voted for Donald Trump by 8%, despite Biden ultimately ascending to the presidency. Now, right now, the state is not really considered a very competitive race at all, and Ohio is expected to easily back the former president. The state of Michigan, generally considered the bluest of the three Rust Belt states, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. In the state of Michigan, Joe Biden was able to flip the state from Donald Trump by a margin of 155,000 votes back in 2020. However, this election round, it does not look too good for the former vice president and the current president. Biden was able to essentially net his 155,000 votes entirely from counties like Kent County, as well as Oakland County, as well as the huge Democratic turnout in counties like Wayne, which is where Detroit is located. However, the Democratic primary in the state showed that Biden had significant weaknesses with the Arab American population, thanks to the Israel-Hamas war, as well as the college-educated population, especially those teenagers, those who were just able and eligible to end up voting in the 2024 election. Generally speaking, if you look at who's favored to win according to FiveThirtyEight here, you can still see that Joe Biden is favored. However, the most recent polls does suggest that Joe Biden is behind Donald Trump by a margin of 3%, which is sufficient for Trump again to carry the state by a lean margin. Not the best news for Joe Biden. Another state that does not look too good for the president is the state of Wisconsin. Wisconsin only voted for the president by a margin of 20,000 votes back in 2020. In fact, the margin was actually narrower than Trump's win in the state in 2024. Biden was able to win the state solely based on his pretty dominating performance in the wild counties as well as Milwaukee. He still got crushed in these three wild counties here, Waukesha, Washington, and Ozaukee counties, but not by the margins that Hillary Clinton got crushed or previous Democrats got crushed by in those three counties. However, this time, the most recent poll here also shows a 3% lead for Donald Trump, which is sufficient for the state to go for Trump again by a lead margin. All three of these states are predicted to go for Trump, according to the most recent polls, by exactly 3%. That does not spell good news for the president, as he has lost 4 states that he won back in 2020, and another state, New Jersey, again, that is considered toss-up, despite the fact that Trump was actually lost the state in 2020 by a margin of 15.8%. Next, we head on to the state of Virginia, a traditionally very conservative state that trended heavily towards the Democratic Party. Biden was the first Democrat in decades to win the state by double digits against former President Donald Trump. If you look at the state of Virginia here, it's largely thanks to Fairfax County, as well as some of the suburbs around it, to contribute to how Biden was able to win the state. However, this time around, the polling is not super friendly to Joe Biden, as the latest coefficient poll suggested the state of Virginia is actually tied 41-41. Now, keep in mind, this was a pre-debate poll, and this is essentially across the United States. Post-debate polls have been worse for Biden than the pre-debate ones. I do believe generally that the incumbent generally wins the undecided vote, but the fact that the state is a tie is still very concerning for Joe Biden, and right now I'm just going to characterize it as such. The state of North Carolina does not look much better for the incumbent either, as he trails Donald Trump by 12% in a state that he lost to Donald Trump by a margin of 1.3%, or about 70,000 votes. We see generally that the Democratic Party is able to do pretty well in the suburban areas, but it just shows that the most recent polls Democrats are getting appalling results here in many of the rural black counties, in many of the rural counties in general, and even in some of the suburbs, the areas that Trump struggled with the most, both in 2016 and in 2020. Now, the state of North Carolina is actually a safe Republican state, just showing how messed up the Democratic Party right now is. Next up, the state of Georgia. Georgia polling has historically been extremely accurate. Oftentimes, the statewide result is off by less than 2% of what the polls predicted. In 2020, Joe Biden won the state by 0.23%. He was expected to win the state according to a FiveThirtyEight polling aggregate by a margin of 1.2%. The state came down to the Atlanta suburbs, which delivered in huge numbers for Biden. For example, Gwinnett County, Hillary Clinton won the county by just 4, and Joe Biden was able to win it by 18%, it looks like. And that was how Joe Biden was able to win the state. However, this time around, the polling looks brutal for Joe Biden. According to FiveThirtyEight, Trump has a 61% chance of flipping the state. If anything, I believe the number is higher than that. Accordingly, the state has the highest chance of flipping to Trump of any competitive state, according to FiveThirtyEight, something I further do agree with. The most recent poll conducted by University of Georgia, featuring 1,000 respondents, showed Trump with a 5% lead across the state, sufficient for a likely margin. This is a state so far that has flipped by the largest margin of any single state. The next state, the state of Florida. Florida was also brutal for Biden in the 2020 election. It was one of the early indicators that Biden was going to have a rough night compared to what people expected, especially because of Biden's miserable performance in Miami-Dade, a county that Hillary Clinton was able to carry by 30 points, and a county that Joe Biden only carried by 7 points thanks to the problematic turnout Democrats had across the city, as well as the Hispanic vote just being brutal for the Democratic Party. Currently, according to FiveThirtyEight, Trump has a better than 3 in 4 chance of winning the state. If anything, I think Biden's chances of winning the state at this point is below 10%. The most recent poll conducted by Wilton Strategies shows Trump with a 6% lead over Joe Biden in the state. At one point, the aggregate had Trump up by 14 points. Right now, the most recent poll suggests a likely victory for Donald Trump, putting Trump at 253 Electoral College votes to Joe Biden, who is still stuck at 169. Remember, Biden started with 167, and he has only gained one competitive state, Maine's at-large vote, while Trump has gained all of these swing states. Next up, in the state of Minnesota, Minnesota is the state with the longest Democratic voting history of any state in the United States. It was the only state that Walter Mondale carried in the landslide election for Ronald Reagan in 1984. The state, again, is very blue because of the Minneapolis suburbs, specifically Hennepin County and Ramsey County. However, in the Democratic primaries in 2024, an unusually high number of voters voted uncommitted, resulting in 11 delegates for the uncommitted movement just from the state of Minnesota, the highest of any state. Now, if you look at the Minnesota poll conducted by Emerson, which is the most recent poll, Joe Biden maintains a 2% lead over Donald Trump. Not the most impressive margin, but a win is a win nonetheless, especially considering that Biden has been doing quite poorly across the entire United States. Next up, the state of Iowa. Iowa is a state that Donald Trump won in the 2020 election by more than 8 points. Democrats have not really targeted it in the 2024 election, as Biden and Trump, except for the caucuses and primaries, have not visited the state for a single time. The state voted for Trump by about 140,000 votes in 2020, despite expected to be competitive. Currently, there's only 10 polls in the state, but the most recent poll by Zogby Strategies, which is a intern funded by RFK Jr., shows Trump up in the state within the margin of error by just 2%, 46.5% to 44.5%. Honestly, I could not disagree more with the poll. I think Trump will win the state by double digits, but still, I need to follow the characterization, and Iowa is the only state so far where Trump is significantly underperforming his 2020 performance, according to the polling. Now next is Nebraska's 2nd Congressional District. The one lone district is from the Omaha region, an area that heavily trended towards Joe Biden in the 2020 election. Joe Biden won the district by roughly 25,000 votes, which may seem tight, but considering the fact that there were only about 300,000 votes cast in the district, it's not really easy to overcome. Trump had a rally in that district. Back in 2020, I don't think Biden actually visited it, and still, Trump came up quite a bit short in that district. So I do believe right now that Joe Biden is probably favored, something that 538 does agree. I believe that Joe Biden has about a 2-to-1 chance of winning the district. In the most recent poll conducted there, a Republican intern does show Biden with a 5% lead, so this is sufficient for a likely characterization. Next, we go to the state of Colorado. Colorado is a state that has trended heavily blue over the past decade or so. A decade ago, or a bit over that, Republicans were actually favored in the state. Now it consistently votes for Democrats. That is because Democrats have done significantly better in some of the suburbs. For example, Cory Gardner, the former Republican senator from the state, a one-term senator that unseated Democrat Mark Udall in the state back in 2014 as the Senate candidate, was able to win counties like Jefferson County and Adams County, counties that voted for Biden by at least 16 points in 2020. These are counties that in no way, shape, or form are going to vote for a Republican, and I really don't buy the argument that the state will be close. I think Trump will still lose the state by double digits, although it probably will narrow down the margin slightly. Colorado currently is projected to go for Biden by about 10 points, according to 538. The most recent poll by Zogby Strategies has the race at D+6. I think that is on the narrower side of things, but I do agree with the likely Democrat characterization. Now going to the state of New Mexico. New Mexico was a state that also voted for Joe Biden by double digits in the 2020 election, and is not expected to be particularly competitive. Sure, the Hispanic vote will likely shift some of these counties further away from the Democratic Party and towards Republicans, especially in the rural Republican areas of the state. Democratic areas like Albuquerque and Santa Fe are expected to hold strong for a Democratic Party. The most recent poll, however, conducted by a Republican intern, some 1892 polling, etc., shows the race at just a 1% lead for Joe Biden. Personally, I definitely would not buy that, but because this is just a polling map, I'm going to have to apply that onto this electoral college map. Now going to the state of Texas. Texas, as a powerhouse in politics, generally a Republican could not win an election without the state of Texas, at least presidentially. Trump has already crossed the 270 electoral votes needed to win the presidency, so in this scenario it doesn't matter. But of course, Trump is also favored in the state of Texas. He won the state by 5.6% over Joe Biden in 2020. Biden had made this race pretty competitive thanks to double-digit overperformances in Tarrant County. In some areas like, for example, Fort Bend, we saw Williamson County like 8 or 9 points towards Biden. Trends in Collins County, Denton County, really many of these suburbs that historically have been heavily Republican voted for Biden, or at least was pretty competitive in the 2020 election. However, Democrats saw 55-point reduction in supports in counties like Starr County. Zapata County saw 40-point reduction in support. Even the more populated ones like Hidalgo County or Webb County shifted 25 points towards the Republican Party in 2020, hindering Democratic chances to win the state. The most recent poll here suggests that Joe Biden is down to Donald Trump here by about 9 points, conducted by the Manhattan Institute. I think that's pretty fair. It shows that the suburban areas will more or less stay the same, while some of these Hispanic areas, predominantly Hispanic areas or the rural areas, are going to see heavy boosts in turnout, resulting in slightly better results for the Republican Party. Nevertheless, here I agree with the likely Republican characterization in the state of Texas. So what's the summary here? First off, recent polling looks really bad for Biden. Biden's numbers were not amazing or amusing to anybody, but the debates had just made them worse, right? New Jersey is right now a toss-up. Virginia is a toss-up. New Mexico is Biden +1. Maine is Biden +2, right? These are definitely not numbers that Biden wants, essentially in any state but Iowa. Iowa's a pretty good number for Biden right now. He's only down by 2, but I don't believe that's going to occur. In short, right now, if the election was held today, I think Biden stands little to no chance of winning the election. Trump is not the most popular president or former president, but the fact is Biden is so unpopular, still recovering from the sufferings of that debate where Biden really messed up. However, in this election, we still have several months. Biden could still turn the table around, but 3 months is not necessarily that much time for Biden to make a change. Right now, if the election was held today, certainly Trump is the heavy favored. By November, it's kind of tough to say, but I still think that at this point, that Trump is probably favored to win the election. I don't think he's going to win New Jersey. I don't think he's going to win Virginia. I don't think New Mexico is going to be that close. But again, this is the map. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day. Goodbye.